All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the lineup. My name is Leonie from Soho. And we're really glad that you're joining us today. We've got three fantastic authors that are publishing books this fall, or they're already out, that we're talking to today. But first, we've got a few housekeeping things to talk about. The lineup is a collaboration between Soho Crime and Mystery to Me Books in Madison, Wisconsin, who are handling all of our book sales and, of course, our Crowdcast platform. The series is focused on highlighting Soho crime authors and giving them a digital platform to talk about their work. Our next event will be on December 5th. It's at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. It's going to feature Stephanie Barron and Chris McKinney for a conversation about series enders. There's nothing online yet. We will get that information up as soon as we can. But in the meantime, you can put that into your calendar if that's interesting to you. By attending a virtual lineup event, we always have some sort of special promotion or merchandise. This time, we have a 30% discount code that you can use to buy these authors' books. The code will expire by the end of the event, so you can click the button at the bottom there to purchase your books. And using the code LINEUP10, you'll be able to receive 30% off. So lineup is LINEUP and then the number 10, 10, for that discount code. All of these events are recorded. So afterwards, if you'd like to watch it back, you can use the same link, or you can go to sohocrimelineup.com and watch it in our events archive. And I think that's it. We've also got a Q&A here over on the right side of your screen if you'd like to submit any questions to be answered by the authors at the end of the event, time permitting. So feel free to send them in there. And we're really great and happy to have three amazing authors with us today. Thank you guys for joining us.
Well, thanks for bringing us all together.
Pleasure.
Yeah, time zones.
Thank you.
I'm going to do a quick little introduction of who we've got with us today, and then we're going to do some readings and answer a few questions and just have a merry old time. Leonie Swann grew up near Munich and earned degrees in philosophy, communications, and psychology from Munich University and the Munich School of Philosophy. Her debut novel, 3 Bags Full, was published in 2005 and became an instant hit, leading the German bestseller charts for months. It has since been translated into 26 languages and won the prestigious Gloucester Prize for crime fiction in the debut category, as well as the PETA Award. She has now published 6 books and lives and works in the English countryside near Cambridge, where she's joining us from today. Hi, Leonie.
Hi, all true.
Mack Jones is a published poet, an award-winning playwright, and a recipient of the Hammett Prize, the Nero Award, and the Kresge Arts in Detroit Literary Fellowship. He was born in Lansing, Michigan, and currently lives in the suburbs of Detroit. He worked in advertising and marketing communications for a number of years before turning to fiction. Hi, Steve.
Hi.
And James R. Benn is the author of the Billy Boyle World War II Mysteries. The debut, Billy Boyle, was selected as a top 5 book of the year by BookSense and was a Dilys Award nominee. A Blind Goddess was listed for the IMPAC Dublin Literary Award. The Rest is Silence was a Barry Award nominee, and The Devouring was a McCavity Award nominee. Benn, a former librarian, lives on the Gulf Coast of Florida with his wife, Deborah Mindell. Hi, Jim.
Hello.
So maybe to start off the afternoon, we would like to do a quick reading of your new book. Maybe you can talk a little bit about it, just to kind of give folks a flavor of your new project. Leonie, do you want to kick us off?
Right, I'll jump in, I suppose. This is the Sponsored Years of Agnes Sharp, the mirror image, but anyway, this is a book, and it is a kind of cozy crime story. If your definition of cozy is quite wide, it's on the darker side of cozy. It's quite, I like to think it has quite an edge, and it's supposed to be a fun read. The characters are very some of them are a bit unhinged, and they're all very quirky, and at the same time, they do have real issues. It's a house share of the elderly, a very special house share, as we're going to learn in the course of the book. And there are some real issues of aging and the way people sort of change and the way people sort of fight to stay, to remain active and self-sufficient. that's sort of a sideline, and of course a main focus on a crime story. They also have Hetty the tortoise, who is a very popular character, and she doesn't get a lot of chapters, but she's a very important presence within the book, and she has this sort of really quite different reptilian angle that gives the story a bit of a spin. I'm going to read something from the beginning because, yeah, there's especially crime things. You don't want to spoil anything. It seems to be the safest option. And it's the first chapter called Edwina's Biscuits. The doorbell rang, and Agnes Sharp abandoned the search for her false teeth, simultaneously pleased and annoyed. Pleased that she had even heard the doorbell. Her ears hadn't really been playing along recently, and sometimes all she could hear was a high-pitched nerve-jangling ringing, accomplished by a rushing sound. So the doorbell was a welcome change. On the other hand, it would be quite embarrassing to open the door without the aforementioned false teeth, unclear and toothless. But the caller had to be gotten rid of before he had the idea of going snooping around the garden, teeth or no teeth. "I'm coming! Just a minute!" Agnes bellowed into the hall. Then she sallied forth, out of the room, mind the threshold, and then the stairs. A step forward, a step down, then bring down the other foot, and so on. 26 times. A minute, my foot. When she reached the first landing, a real rage had built up in her. Towards the stairs, the caller, the renegade false teeth, but also her housemates. Why did she always get the difficult jobs, like scaling the stairs, or taking out the bins, or absolutely everything? Edwina would have made it down the stairs somewhat quicker, but she would of course have been useless at the door. Bernadette was sitting in her room, crying her blind eyes out. At this time, Marshall was mostly connected to the computer as if by umbilical cord. And you obviously couldn't expect Winston to attempt the descent without a stair lift. Why had nobody repaired the stupid stair lift? Then Agnes remembered that it had been her job to call for it to be repaired, but with her unreliable hearing and her aversion to the telephone, she had kept putting it off. It was her own fault then, as so often seemed to be the case these days. She had mastered the last step and was dragging herself to the front door with a calculated slowness, accompanied by the doorbell's staccato chimes. Did they think she was deaf? What was the buffoon playing at? Agnes fumbled briefly with the latch. Then she threw the door open. She would have liked to give the caller a piece of her mind, but nothing came to her. "Jeff!" she snapped. She didn't quite carry it off and got even more annoyed. Miss Sharp?" The caller peered rudely past her into the house, a bloody whippersnapper with officious glasses and a briefcase under his arm. This couldn't be a good sign. Agnes crossed her thin arms while the whippersnapper switched on a winning smile. Rather too late. "Miss Sharp, I have wonderful news for you." He really shouldn't have said that. Up to now, Agnes had simply planned to get rid of the troublemaker, but now she lost it. Wonderful news? Today of all days. It was too much. Despite her missing teeth, she tried a friendly old lady smile, with moderate success as she gathered from the puzzled look on the sales rep's face. "Oh, for me? How lovely! Come through to the lounge." He only had himself to blame. "Another biscuit?" Where on earth were her teeth? The whippersnapper silently shook his head. He had taken a single bite of his biscuit, and since then had been sitting strangely in the windback chair, chewing. Agnes poured piss-yellow herbal tea into his cup and studied the brochure. The intruder has pushed into her hand. Feigned interest. He put the half-eaten biscuit back on the plate. A cold clatter, like stone on stone. Edwina's biscuits were generally even spurned by the mice, but for occasions like this, they were priceless. "Do you live of your own?" the whippersnapper asked with a mouthful. He didn't want to swallow or spit, so he was stuck. What we offer for people like you is perfect. We manage your house, take care of renting out. We take care of everything while you spend your golden sunset years at Lime Tree Court. He went quiet and fixed his gaze strangely past Agnes on the floor where Hetty the tortoise was passing with her usual elegance. And on her shell, the false teeth. Presumably, they've been travelling around the house by tortoise for quite a while, a disembodied mobile grin. Exactly the kind of thing Marshall would find funny. Agnes leaned right forward, fished for her false teeth, and grabbed them. Hooray. She quickly put the dentures into her mouth and beamed at the whippersnapper with rows of pristine teeth. Golden sunset years, you said? Without financial worries, the sales rep gave in and stood up. You're going already? What a shame. Are you sure you don't want another? Agnes picked up another biscuit threateningly, but the whippersnapper was already on his way to the door, and a good thing that was too, because Lilith was lying out in the woodshed. Well, off day.
Thank you, Leonie.
Nice.
Love that.
You're welcome.
It's so hooky. Steve, do you want to go next?
Sure. Batten down the hatches in case anyone is offended by this word or that. This is from the new book Deus X, the fourth in the August Snow thriller series. And I'll begin at the beginning, and when I reach the end, I'll stop, as the saying. I am royalty, you bastard. It was 42 degrees with a cold gray drizzle rolling northeast over everything in its path. Apparently, the slowly dying Gulf Stream refused to do its job today of warming things up a bit in Oslo. This, I thought, peering out of a broken glass window at the monochromatic day, is what comes from saying yes to your girlfriend when you definitely meant hell no. Did you hear what I said, you wretched, filthy immigrant? The blue-blooded sovereign with the acne-scarred face and chest had inherited through an arcane and vaunted royal system more than several lifetimes of common folks' dreams. Money had no meaning to him. There was nothing to strive for, nothing to achieve, since all struggles had been settled and accomplished, and accomplishments codified generations earlier. Sleepwalking through his privileged life had led him to seek out the dark, jagged edges and emulsified, shadowed corners of the human experience. Places where he could finally feel his heart race, his breath quicken. Places where he could achieve the only intimacy he thought. The intimacy of watching, feeling, smelling the essence of young girls dissipate into the air around him as he sodomized and strangled them to death. I regretted not having a gun. Of all the unrepentantly evil people I'd put down in my life as a Marine, cop, and private citizen, the man behind me, tied to a rusting, wobbly metal chair, was 10th level twisted, probably deserving of a bullet shortly after his birth. If I had acted upon my initial instincts, this monster's scrawling neck would have been snapped 40 minutes ago. But there were people counting on me to hold the line for the laws of this land. A jar of Vicks mentholated vapor rub would have come in handy too. I desperately needed the stinging grease in my nostrils to mask the stench of the place. Hey, black man, the pasty prince shouted. I'm talking to you. I really wish I had my Glock. One shot, justifiable homicide, and I'd still be a goddamn Scandinavian hero. Probably put a statue of me up in Christiana Torv Square. My blood reigned from the time of King Harold Fairhair, when you people were eating bananas in trees, his majestic mess riled. How dare you treat me like I could squash you like a bug. He'd become increasingly agitated over the past 15 minutes, and frankly, I was bored with him. Here I was in an abandoned warehouse on the grimy industrial outskirts of Oslo, Norway, babysitting an inbred, clearly psychotic bastard son of obscure Norwegian royalty. A viscount or viceroy or some antiquated crap, no one in the Norwegian royal family gave a thimbleful of blue blood piss about. It was a bone dampening spring morning, and all I wanted was a hot shower, cup of coffee, and what passed for donuts from Brooklyn Bakverk in Oslo's Old Town. Are you listening to me, savage? No, I said. I gave my watch another impatient glance. 6 minutes and counting. I'd use arts and crafts wax Irish twine to tie him to the chair, stronger than zip ties will ever be. Plus, the white riot on January 6, 2021 in DC ruined the use of zip ties for guys like me around the world. Any cop stops you with a pocket full of zip ties these days, it's off to the pokey. Some cop stops you with a spool of waxed Irish twine, must have picked it up for a kid's bead bracelet project. After knocking His Highness out with a quick right cross, securing him to the chair was easy. The hardest part was being that close to him. He was pale and stank of sweat and decay, all barely masked by an exorbitantly expensive cologne, a scent the Oslo cops had discounted as speculation, not hard evidence. Sometimes speculation is all there is to go on. Ask any seasoned police detective, theoretical physicist, or priest. I was trying very hard not to look at the sickness strapped to the chair. Such a glance might lead me to either vomiting or cutting off his diseased balls. Possibly both. As expected, his threat soon morphed into bargaining. I'm very wealthy and you're black. I'm an opportunity for you. He offered money, loads of it. His house in the south of France. A variety of dehumanizing sexual perversions at his physical expense. Enough was enough. I grabbed 2 liters of gas in a red metal gas can, unscrewed the cap. He had intended to use the gas to destroy his grotesque collection of evidence. What are you doing? He asked as I splashed gasoline on his bare feet. A friend of mine, I said. Guy I knew in Afghanistan, Army Special Forces. Stop! Why? What are you doing? He squirmed in the chair, trying to break free of his ties. I said, holding up a gloved forefinger to his lips. He audibly gulped, his pronounced Adam's apple bobbing. Anyway, this guy, his Humvee hits an IED, lit him up like Johnny Storm, Fantastic Four, the Human Torch. A couple weeks later, I visit him in the hospital, wrapped up like a chicken shawarma. Why are you telling me this? I shushed him again. I'll get to the point, because I know you're just dying to get to the ninth circle of hell. Another splash of gasoline on his feet. Yeah, so anyway, this guy, second and third degree burns, everywhere except his feet. Had those Michelangelo marble Roman god feet. The rest of him, beef jerky with bloodshot eyes. You know what he says to me? He says, what happened? Everybody says I got burned. His doctor tells me somebody engulfed in flames goes from 0 to insane in like 1/10 of a second. Transcendental insanity, like floating in space and watching a kid on Earth zap ants with a magnifying glass. I put the gas can down, reached into my pocket, and pulled out a pack of matches I'd cribbed from a Chinese restaurant because of the nice logo. On the other hand, when bits and pieces of the human body, like say feet, are set alight, the mind can't make the leap to insanity. It doesn't have the distance, no escaping the immediacy, the localized sensory proximity of the pain. I lit a match and stood back. No, please, God, no, please. He was weeping, slobbering, trying to shake the gasoline from his bony white feet. Okay, I'm quiet. See, no talking. You're still talking. Okay. He clamped his bloodless lips together tightly. I blew out the match. And that's as far.
Thanks.
I'll go there.
Jim, you want to round us out with your excerpts?
Okay. So this is from Proud Sorrows, the 18th Billy Wilde novel. And it occurred to me when I was thinking about what to have this one be about, that these guys have been through 2+ years of World War II and hadn't had any leave yet. So they've been on the front lines and a whole lot of trouble. So I decided to send them to a quiet English village with a nice tree. But of course, as we all know from watching Masterpiece Mystery, there's always a murder in a quiet English village. And to set up the situation that they're going to encounter, I wrote a prologue in the third person. So these books are all from my protagonist's point of view in the first person. So this is a setup 2 years prior to the events in this story, to give you to introduce some of the characters in the village and give you an idea of what they are going to encounter in November 1944. May 1942. It began as a glow in the night sky, a faint flicker barely visible in the swirling low clouds and pelting rain. Stephen Elliott saw it as he shut the door behind him and made for his automobile. Marston Hall sat on a hill with a commanding view of the valley and the flight path of the aircraft. Elliott shielded his eyes from the spitting rain and watched the flames on their descent, calculating exactly where metal would meet ground. In his surgery, John Bodkin heard the growl of the engine. Instinctively, he looked up as if to gauge the distance, but quickly returned to finish stitching a farmer's arm. A nasty cut, but clean enough. Agnes Day, who had received the message that her assistance was needed, risked a look skyward as she pedaled towards the doctor's surgery. The aircraft was close enough to make out the burning portside engine. German, probably, she shuddered, fearful of a sudden crash, of bombs and death, of Germans in their midst, of torn bodies and shrieking men demanding care. She'd had enough of that in London. Sir Richard Seton had been checking on the horses. As he shut the barn door, he followed the arc of light, little more than an indistinct glimmer from where he stood. Still, he knew it was dangerous. His eyes flitted across Seton Manor, looking for telltale lines of illumination at the edges of blackout curtains. Nothing, though the building was as dark and as quiet as the Norfolk countryside. Worry gnawed at him. Inside the aircraft, a Heinkel 111 bomber, flames shot sporadically into the cockpit as the pilot struggled with the controls. Screams pierced the air, louder even than the roar of the engines. The dorsal gunner was badly wounded. The two other gunners had patched him up as best they could before the pilot ordered them to bail out. The navigator was moaning, his head lolling as he held his belly. Wind whistled through the shattered canopy as the pilot tried to ignore the blood pooling in his boot. All he wanted was to find a patch of ground before it found him. They'd never make it back across the North Sea. A night landing in a storm was their only hope. On the ground below, there was no hint of the agonies they suffered. Alfred Bunch held the blackout curtain open for his wife, Mildred, as they left the pub. The wind nearly took his cap, and he pulled it on tight as he cocked his head to find the source of the droning sound growing closer. Mildred pointed and asked if the light was a shooting star, but Alfred gauged it as something more sinister. They hurried, watching over their shoulders as the glow dropped lower and seemed to follow them. Father Noel Tanner, at his evening prayers, heard the crippled aircraft overhead. He sighed, said Amen, rose and reached for his boots. The living and the dead might be in need of what comfort he could give. David Archer huddled at the foot of an oak, his hands pressed over his ears to shut out the blaring noise of death. It haunted him, even in the grove of trees perched on a hilltop overlooking the chalk cliffs and the sea. He came here at night for the quiet that had never settled over the blasted ground of no man's land in the last war. Now, his silent refuge was shattered. The burning aircraft dropped from the sky and drew his gaze as the space between hurtling metal and hard ground narrowed into nothingness. Archer pressed his face against the oak and rubbed his cheek on the rough bark, the warm blood soothing in the darkness. Throughout the village, eyes turned skyward at the sound. A child asked if she should make a wish, but was shushed and told to get back in bed. The war had come to Sleaford, and everyone who eyed the crippled bomber hoped it would keep on going, out to sea or back to Germany if need be, but away from here. Graham Cheatwood stood at his third-floor bedroom window. He watched Stephen Elliott stop and gaze at the sky, then drive away. He searched for what the man had been looking at and spotted it. A voice beckoned him to come back to bed, but he knew that was not going to happen. He picked up the telephone and barked out an order. Then he threw on his uniform and watched the slow descent of the aircraft as it vanished behind a hilltop close to the cliffs near above the sea. Then there was nothing but the motionless reflection of flames in the fog.
Thanks, Jim.
There we go. And we're off.
You know, I'm going to start with a question for you, Jim, just about the series in total, but also specifically Proud Sorrows. You are celebrated by critics and readers alike for the amount of research that goes into your books. Can you tell us kind of about your research process and maybe how it's evolved over 18 books?
What I try to do for each book is find something that is relatively unknown and strikes me as worthy of knowing about the Second World War. And in this case, the story that I really wanted to tell was about two disparate groups of individuals, one Jewish immigrants, German and Austrian, who came to the United States as young men in the 1930s, their families getting them out of Nazi Germany. And they wanted to serve as best they could. And the army took advantage of them as native speakers of German to be train them as interrogators. And they operated in secret. And there is a POW facility in this village that host them. But what really struck me was doing research into the British fascist movement. About this time in 1944, a lot of the British fascists who had been locked up at the start of the war as a danger because they wanted to ally themselves with Nazi Germany were being let out of prison on the theory that the danger of invasion had passed, but they went right back to work. And the dichotomy of these two groups really struck me. There's Englishmen and women, fairly high-born, who had everything, who had wealth. They lived in a free society, and they wanted to give that all away to be part of a fascist regime. Then they have the Ritchie boys, and that name comes from the camp they were trained at, who were willing to sacrifice everything to defeat that same the fascist regime. So when I found that those two groups coexisted in the same time and place, I wanted to create a story that would elucidate that and illuminate what these two different groups were all about. So usually what I try to do is find that kind of intersection of interesting ideas, little known ideas, and then build a story around that.
Yeah, and our very first lineup event, we had a historical fiction panel, like historical fiction and crime. And one of the big questions that we asked then that I will ask you now is, when you're writing, crime and fiction that dips into historical fiction, how do you decide keeping things historically accurate? How do you balance that with like telling a good story? Are there details that get left out that you wish that you could include?
Yes, there's a lot that gets left out because it's just not part of the story. And sometimes I can get so wound up in wanting to get something exactly right that I realize I just spent an hour researching, did something happen in this town or the town 10 miles down the road? And I usually at that point go, doesn't matter. If I can't find out the answer in an hour, then maybe there's one other person in the universe that knows the real answer. And it doesn't matter as long as the story is true to the time and place. Those are the kind of facts that I can let slide. But I never want to do something that's so outside of reality that people would question whether that was, or they would think it was true. So there is a balancing act, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine that becomes very situational too as you're writing. Speaking of balancing acts, Steve, we're going to move to you quickly. So we talked about this kind of before we started the stream. We were in the green room, but Steve was talking about living in Detroit, and Leonie had never been to Detroit, and you were kind of saying, don't listen to what people say about Detroit.
Right.
People obviously have a lot of opinions about Detroit. Some, I'm sure, are better than others. You call Detroit home. What is it like to write crime fiction based in your home city? And do you feel any pressure to portray Detroit in a certain way?
Your last question first. No, I don't feel pressure to portray Detroit in any particular way. I try to portray Detroit as it is, warts and beauty marks all together. It's primarily based in my 43-year experience of having lived here. As to your first question, Detroit has kind of a well-worn reputation around the world as the Motor City, a long ago association with Motown, the city of soul, a rough and tumble town that has gone through its share of woes and worries. And of course, the dynamic between Black people and white people, that's always associated with Detroit. The Detroit that August Snow lives in, that I've experienced, has changed in the past 20 years. It is it's a town of high technology. Certainly the automotives are still here, but the very fabric of the city has changed. And by that, I mean, whereas it was once thought of as a hovel where Black people lived, Detroit is becoming one of the most popular places for young suburbanites to live downtown. And the growth in businesses is reflecting that. And also, as I've mentioned in previous August Snow books, it's reflected in church attendance downtown, specifically the Catholic Church. Whereas once the Catholic Church catered to the poor and the elderly through the Franciscans, now it is it's primarily white, upper middle class people attending services with a conservative young priest, and that's a new dynamic. But again, the city itself is changing, and for better and for worse. For better, more people are downtown, the tax base has gone up, new buildings, a wide variety of restaurants. On the other side, the elderly, the poor get pushed further and further out. So it's changing.
Can I just ask a quick question? Steve,
Sure.
you finding any room for new stories and new plots within that changing dynamic? Or
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You can really change a city. You can change the basic dynamics of a city, but it's harder still to change that city's prevailing personality. Wherever you go, those same basic human emotions, human drives remain. The search for power, the greed, those basic emotions, what makes up a human being, those things remain. And so the change has it's affected me, and it's affected the way August sees the city.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Thank you, Jim, for that question. That was very good. Switching it up a little bit, Leonie, you have a book that sits in a little bit of a different world than the other two books that we're discussing today. We've considered it cozy-ish. It's been called Cozy with Teeth. But that is not to discount the very real sort of sometimes very dark moments that happen in this book. One of the more whimsical things that you incorporate in your books, though, is the use of animal perspective and point of view. So your last book, 3 Bags Full, used animal POV in the form of a herd of sheep trying to solve the mystery of the murder.
Yeah.
And in this book, you talked a little bit about Hetty, the tortoise that comes through the book. So can you talk about why you include animal perspective?
Well, I think you could almost phrase it the other way around. I write books so that I can include animals in them somehow. well, just stepping back a bit, one of the things that I find really, really pleasurable and joyful about fiction is the fact that it allows you to inhabit somebody else's mind. I believe that no other medium can do it the same way, and I think it's just something very, very unique adventure. And once you're there, and once you're already doing a step out of your own frame of mind to somebody else's, I felt like, why not push the boundaries a bit? Why not experiment? And I think I'm by nature quite a playful creature, and I've always been really interested in animals, really loved them because they're so similar to us. I mean, there's so many parallels you can see, and they tell you a lot about the way we work as well. But on the other hand, they are different, and there's quite an interesting tension there. So I'm really drawn to terms of trying to step into these other minds and trying to see our world from that angle. And I just find it very rewarding, and also just very enlightening to try to put yourself in other places and then see how does the world really look. Because for me, reading is one way of discovering the world, or angles of the world that I can't really experience firsthand as a person. An extreme case, thought experiment that I feel like happens in all fiction to a certain degree. Talking of crime fiction, I feel that animals are especially suited to crime fiction because they have this outsider point of view that is something that happens a lot when you sort of investigate crime. You usually have the crime, and there's some kind of closed society or some milieu type thing, and then you've got an outside investigator who enters that, and the animals in a way are the ultimate outsiders. They're even further out than your average drunken or alcoholic investigator, and there's a lot of tension there. There's also a lot of opportunity for humor and fun bits, because the clash between how a sheep sees the world and how the reader will sort of see the world, or how Hetty the tortoise sort of perceives. I've got this first bit where she finds a dead body, and her first impulse is to just sort of nudge a bit closer because it's nice and warm. And as the body cools, she loses interest and wanders off, because that was it for her. That's her take on this whole situation, and it's just it's sort of a fun, playful thing that at the same time tells you a lot about characters, tells you a lot about you, hopefully maybe even yourself to a certain degree.
Absolutely. And we're going to be getting a second Agnes book next year, which is very exciting.
Hey.
And we have been told that there is some animal POV in that one
Yes.
as well, although it's not Hetty, it's somebody.
It's not Hetty. Hetty's in the fridge, I'm afraid, because she's overwintering in the fridge, yes, which has been documented. I did my research. It's not conventional, but it's still doable under certain circumstance. But everyone, don't put your tortoise in the fridge just yet. Do your research first, please.
Leonie, if I could just say one thing, I made the mistake of it was really purely stupidity on my part. I made the mistake of saying to a friend of mine who is a crime fiction historian, just loves crime fiction. I made the mistake of saying, yeah, I enjoyed the occasional cozy, like Agatha Christie, and Robin just stopped me. She said, Agatha Christie is not cozy. And she explained to me why, and I went back and read a couple of Agatha Christie. She was murderous. I mean, she was vicious. So cozy with teeth, yeah, I love that. I love that.
Although obviously the whole cozy thing is just a label, and like all labels, it has a lot of shortcomings. And to be honest, I don't quite know what I think cozy means in a pretty setting to a certain degree. Something not too gritty, having sort of like white tablecloth and that kind of stuff. So yeah, but as with all labels, it's problematic and helpful at the same time.
Yeah, very true. Yes, we're joined by authors that all have series, and Jim, I mean, the 18th installment of the Billy Boyle series is quite an achievement. So congratulations.
Thank you.
It's really amazing to think about. Just me personally, that's so cool. I wanted to ask, what is it about Billy Boyle as a character that has made you want to spend so much time with him?
Well, I think one thing has to be the circle of friends that Billy has gathered around himself. So one thing I guess I admire about him as a character is he has good taste in friends, meaning that he's good to them. He'll do whatever he can to help, and they in turn are loyal to him. And as they move through these stories, I think readers want to be with the whole ensemble. So in the past, if I had lessened the role of any one secondary character, I'd always get some emails about, what's going to happen in the next book. But people tend to cleave to the relationships of the characters and become heavily invested in how they are going to survive the war, in this case. But I think it's true in fiction, as Hetty was saying. It's you can get into somebody's mind in a way that can't be done in any other art form, but you also have the ability to explore their relationships. And if you like the character, you tend to like the people they like. And also, what I appreciate about Billy is while he has enemies, he also has a more finely tuned disdain for those who, during wartime, treat people badly, meaning, it's war, bad things happen, but when you waste lives, either through an act of murder or through an act of negligence, that is the ultimate crime in his viewpoint. So I like the people he doesn't, I don't like the people he doesn't like. That's one of the key attractions. And I think we all of us have the same. Agnes has her whole group of people that she lives with. They move forward in their investigations. August Snow has this terrific neighborhood of people that he's befriended and become a mentor to. So we move through these stories not just with the protagonist, but with the people that the protagonist cares about. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I have to say, I really admire sticking with the character for such a long time, over so many books. I'm on volume 3 of the Agnes story, and I'm very, very tempted to kill them all off in this one. So it's great. I can see how much you can explore personal relationships in that. But as I said, it's quite a long stretch. Sorry, Stephen, I sort of interrupted you there electronically.
That's fine. No, I was just going to say I've not read all of Jim's Billy Boyle series, but I've read enough to know that over 18, 19 books, you can feel the freshness and the enthusiasm and the mastery of storytelling with each book.
Thank you.
So, if you've not read any of the Billy Boyle World War II mysteries, please do, because Jim is fantastic. Don't tell him I said this, okay? But he's wonderful. Every book is full of energy, imagination, warmth, and excitement.
And plus, one of the characters is from Detroit, so Big Mike, or a cop.
How can you go wrong with Detroit? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
That's great. You need to take to heart an SMJ endorsement for sure. We have got a few more questions left, but if anybody listening at home wants to submit a question, we do have some time for that. So do put that in the chat here on the right side of your screen. I have a few group questions I'd love to ask you guys too. First is very general, another question I'm sure you get asked all the time, but once more, how did you decide on crime fiction as your primary medium?
Does anybody know?
Not everyone wants.
Well, I'll just kick it off by saying when I watched The Godfather in 1972, I got interested in the idea of what would have happened if Sonny Corleone had been the one to go into the Marine Corps instead of Michael. And that idea just kind of noodled around in my head literally for decades before I did anything about it. And I decided that a fictional investigation in a real life setting, exploring that kind of outsider notion, was the way to go. So it just fit the nascent idea that I had carried around all those years. But I can't say it was terribly well thought out.
As a kid, I used to read a lot of science fiction. That's where my head was at. Then I moved on to mysteries, and I love mysteries. And college kind of spoiled that for me because I thought, well, since I'm in college, I should be reading more hefty literature. And wow, hefty literature is so boring. Nobody wants to talk about Flaubert. Nobody. And I just circled back around to crime fiction through a rereading of The Maltese Falcon, some of the early Perry Mason stories, and Robert B. Parker. So I love mystery thriller fiction. I think it's a great way of exploring what's at the core of the human heart. Yeah, that's me.
Right.
I'm sorry?
You're breaking up a bit. No, sorry. It's a bit broken up at the moment for me. I think it's the internet connection, but as long as you can hear, I didn't hear anything, so I thought you stopped talking, but I'm not quite sure whether the sound cut off. So can you give me a thumbs up if I can? Thank you. Great. I think for me, crime fiction gives me a lot of freedom to do what I want to do. It's like a frame for me that makes my story accessible to a lot of people because most people like mysteries. Mysteries are something with a universal appeal. If you've got this riddle and you want to solve, there's just everybody likes that, and that gives you the opportunity to tell all kinds of stories with that slant. And as I already mentioned, I'm quite fond of the a bit more out there point of views, like animals, or just things that take a bit of a leap of faith. And I find that leap of faith is facilitated for my readers if they have this sort of very familiar crime setting to hold on to, and it will give them a structure to venture into my story, which might be a crime fiction story, but it will also be all kinds of other things that they might not have signed up for in the first place, but hopefully through that frame I'm giving them, it will still be an enjoyable and pleasurable ride. So yeah, that's my take on crime fiction.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Two-pronged final question here, pending any audience questions we get sent in. I want to know either what you're currently reading or a book that you read that you felt inspired the novel that you are talking about today.
Right.
Or do you read? Period.
Leonie?
Well, right now I'm not reading anything because I'm exactly 1 month from my deadline, and there's still a few issues I have to solve. So I'm on a bit of a reading ban at the moment. However, if I drive or do other sort of manual tasks, I do have an audio book going on for those moments. And at the moment, that is Stephen King's Holly, which I was curious about and just sort of in the middle of it. So I can't really say that much about it yet, but that's the only thing I permit myself in terms of fiction at the moment. But hopefully things will change very soon once I submitted the manuscript. In terms of inspiration, I suppose generally as inspiration for, starting writing in the first place, because when I grew up, writing fiction always seemed something that's just very far away, something that would have to happen to you like some kind of act of fate. You just sit there and all of a sudden the muse will descend and you write something perfect. And obviously it does not happen like that. And it took a while for me to understand that it's a craft, not so much, something that has to be something that you can sort of hone and perfect and work on. And funnily enough, the book that really nudged me in that direction was Game of Thrones. I was reading that when living in Paris, and George R. R. Martin does this very strong sort of point of view narration. Every chapter is from a different character's point of view, and it's, in my opinion, very well done. And it really sort of sucked me in. I think this is so much fun you can have with perspective and point of view. And I suppose that nudged me. Obviously, what I do is completely different genre and different approach, but that sort of playfulness to start playing around with point of view narration, I suppose that came from Game of Thrones, funnily enough.
I just finished reading a work of nonfiction, The Savage Storm. It's soon to be published. A study of the Italian campaign in 1943, and the historian James Holland approached this using only original source material. So he tracked down diaries and letters and everything in this. He does the high-level description of what was going on, the generals and all that, using their original sources. But it's also Italian civilians, British, German, Canadian, American soldiers, and his technique is just beautiful because you get to know these people, and as you're moving through the story, and they begin to drop, you really feel the pain of that. So it's a remarkable book, The Savage Storm. I highly recommend it. It's a period that I've already covered in the Billy Boyle stories, but that whole notion of telling the story at that elemental level of what's happening day to day to a soldier or to a civilian who's being just steamrolled by this war was remarkable and something I want to keep in my mind.
I'm embarrassed to admit, but my reading time has been limited as of late because I've got 2 stories going. One is science fiction. The other is a Western. And when I'm not working on either of those, I'm thinking of those projects. So reading, I'm embarrassed to say this, at this point in time, is kind of a distraction, because I will find myself thinking about either of these projects or both of these projects. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
There's nothing embarrassing about that. It sounds
No,
very.
you should be embarrassed.
Sounds rather disciplined to me, and I no need to be embarrassed. Yeah.
Well, great. Anybody have any last minute things you want to say about the novels you've been here to speak about today? Go buy them.
Go buy them. Buy books from the showcase authors.
Yes.
If it's Soho, it's got to be good.
Perfect.
Hey, you must have been in advertising.
Oh, don't bring that up. Oh, Jimmy.
Sorry.
Well, thank you, everybody. James R. Benn with Proud Sorrows, which is out now. Stephen Mack Jones, whose book is not out yet, but it will be out in November. You can pre-order it, still at that link. And then Leonie Swann. And so thank you all for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Again, we'll be back on December 5th, doing the same old thing, except we won't have Stephen Mack Jones here to give us a catchy little phrase at the end. We'll pre-record one. It'll be great.
Yeah,
There you go.
you have my permission.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Have a good day, friends.
Thanks.
Thank you, Willie.
everybody.
Good to see you. Take care.